I know you talked in your confirmation hearing, and you've talked since then about the importance of things like mental health, of the support services for veterans. You've promised that these cuts are not going to hit veterans benefits and veterans health care, but we have been getting reports, and we saw on some of the contract lists that came out, that some of these contracts, while not direct support, may be contributing to a suicide prevention program or contributing to a homeless program. How do you draw the line there, and how do you decide what becomes extraneous when you're hitting topics like that I know are key to what you want to do going forward?
Well, I think one of the things that we're looking at here too is leaked reports often get interpreted however someone wants to look at it. And there was a process that was going on, and we started, and again, 2% of this. So it's interesting to see that we found this kind of stuff in just a very small number. When we look at these contracts, I could make a statement that right now has a tangential whatever effect to a veteran, to a forward-facing, but it's me and you giving an interview. The question actually comes is when I had career employees, I also had our senior executives and others look at these contracts and say, can we do this in an efficient way and not affect that? I have to take the leadership judgment of our people actually looking at this instead of, again, what I go back to, and we've went over this a couple of times already, what others say are not in the room making the cuts. Now, they're free to say in this town anything they want to say. God bless the First Amendment. But they're not allowed to make innuendo or scare when they don't have real facts on how we actually went about this stuff.
But you were very confident then that as you're going through these reviews, you have the checks and balances to make sure that if one of these contracts is providing a real service, you're going to be able to pull that back, you're going to be able to...
Look, the VA is not perfect, never has been, never will be. There's not an agency in government, in fact, in private enterprise that's perfect. And we found areas that we thought first, after a first initial step, this may be something that could, and then found out it wasn't, and we've pulled those back. So again, these are the kind of things that, again, when people take it upon themselves to leak documents that they don't know, they don't put context to, or they don't have a real understanding that these are decisional issues going forward, then it doesn't help their cause. They may think it does, but at the end of the day, it's about making VA employees scared and making veterans not want to use our system, and I don't tolerate that.
So, I mean, you mentioned employees scared. Again, this is not exclusive to VA, but there are quite a few federal employees, quite a few veterans in the federal workforce who are staring down job losses. Talk to me about how you're trying to calm some of those fears. Talk to me about, are there plans to implement some new job training programs, some soft landings for some of these folks? Because this is, again, not just VA, but there's quite a few veterans who are going to end up losing their jobs if these federal government cuts go through.
There will be, and I'm not saying not, especially in other departments as well. But also, just as I said just a little bit ago, we're there for help with training programs and others for those that are getting laid off in the private sector as well. What's interesting is there seems to be this idea that if it's a government employee or veteran government employee that is somehow different than if they worked at Southwest or Caterpillar or some of these other companies that's laid off veterans as well. I care about all veterans. And I think we're going to provide everything we can, to have the benefits, if they're veterans, that they've earned to move forward, to find new careers, to find new places to be a part of. This happens in government, it happens in private enterprise a great deal, and we're going to do everything we can to help that situation. But also, I've got to go back to a mandate I've been given, and that is to run the VA in the way that it's supposed to be, and that is putting veterans in our services and our health care as best position I can be.
So you've talked about reinvesting that money in those savings, and I know you've promised that we're going to have some more details on that coming soon, but where are you seeing gaps? Where are you seeing that money being able to put into additional services?
Well, we can put it in the areas that we're looking at that right now as we look in the system for, if there's healthcare needs, if there's looking at our record system, but also into the possibility of new suicide prevention issues or actual treatments that are going to homelessness, and we're freeing up dollars that could actually get us there. Now, I'm also going to tell you something very clearly here, that when you talk about my priorities, suicide and homelessness are very much priorities of mine. And what I have seen here, and nobody seems to have wanted to ask this question, but over the past 5 years, we've spent about the same amount, $3 billion a year in both of those programs, just roughly here. And yet we still have 17 a day that are veterans that commit suicide. We've come down some in veterans homelessness. In fact, veterans homelessness was down as compared to the outside public homelessness, but we're still 40,000. Leo, I got a question. At what point is somebody going to stand up, and it's going to be me, and say, why are we continuing to put the same amount of money, the same amount of time, doing the same thing over and over and getting a same result and calling it a victory? I'm not willing to call 17 deaths a victory. I'm not willing to call 40,000 homeless is a victory. I'm ready to actually go for real change. And if I can take money and resources into mental health, into our other areas, that we can solidify that or reach out through new means to reach veterans who are not a part of our system. Because remember, 17 of those veterans, 40%, some almost 50%, have never been touched by a service that we offer.
So I know you talked about that at your confirmation hearing. Yes. You also talked about the personal connection, your background as a chaplain, yes, and in the reserves, and some of the counseling service you've done. What do you see as the next step forward for that then? How do you approach that differently? Because as you said, more money can solve some problems, but that's not necessarily, dumping more money into something doesn't necessarily solve. So do you see different approaches? Do you see, or is this going to be a review where you've got to figure out what comes next?
I think it's both. It's an either or here. I mean, not in the sense of either or. We're looking at what we're doing now and saying, look, for whatever reason, this publicity, we're not reaching the veteran we're looking at. I think sometimes we're getting into a possibility that we're looking at the physical conditions of some through PTSD, disabilities, others, that are heightened in this need for suicide. But we're also not asking the questions of just normal transition period. And I've already had a conversation with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth about this, and our transition programs I don't think anybody would agree, are very good right now coming out.
It's been a refrain for years.
It has been. So here's the question. Only in Washington, D.C. is the answer to ask the same question again. We're not going to do that. And so I've encouraged us to say, what are we doing in these veteran suicide issues that we're looking at? Are we reaching them? Are we reaching out and having programs for financial management? Are we reaching out having issues that we're reaching newer veterans, younger veterans on marital issues? Those kind of things, gaming issues, addictions, those kind of things. They're not the normal place, but can we reach them in time to say there's something different? I am willing to do anything to make sure we're trying to do our best to reach these people before they take what I believe is the most greatest gift God has given us, and that is life. I'll do whatever it takes to break plates, change things, to say, look, what's working now is okay, but it's not good. So my question is what is the value of working with a suicide? Is it just okay, or do we want to get to good?